And this session will be available tomorrow. I'll put the information in the chat. If you have any questions during the session, please put those in the chat. So again, welcome to the session on Integrate to Automate. And if you want to go to the next slide. The agenda today is we're going to do introductions, and then we're going to talk about the integration service overview. What's the latest? They'll be doing a demo on Gen AI in action, and then a demonstration on Connector Builder. And then they'll go through the integration service roadmap and Q&A. And if you want to go to the next slide. So my name is Diana Gray. I'm the Community Marketing Manager for the Americas. And I will turn it over to Scott, who can introduce himself. And Samrat.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Diana. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Looking forward to this session. Hopefully, we can make this as interactive as possible. My name's Scott Schoenberger. I'm a Senior Product Manager on the Integration Service team. That is the primary focus of today's webinar, so hopefully you're in the right place. And my focus, just to be clear, I work on specific connectors in the connector catalog. And those connector categories include AI and ML, content management, so think things like Box and Dropbox, Google Workspace, and Microsoft 365, which we also kind of call the productivity space. And I'll let Samrat, my colleague, introduce himself.
Thanks, Scott. Hello, everyone. My name is Samrat, and I serve as a senior product manager within integration services team. I'm particularly passionate about the realms involving data analytics, ERP, finance and accounting, and also e-commerce. Today I'm excited to share that I currently oversee all these categories, the ones that I just named. And today I'm really thrilled to dive deep into a topic that combines some of these passions in a way that I believe can truly captivate your interest. Again, thank you for joining, and I hope we can make this webinar really interactive. Thanks.
Cool. So we'll do a little bit of a dive into what integration service is, and talk a little bit, as Diana mentioned, about the latest and greatest in integration service. Diana, can we get that? We did add a poll kind of last minute. Are we able to send out that poll on just to get people's general familiarity with integration service? Here it is. Oh, looks like we got a bunch of poll questions there. If you could take a look at those and add your responses, that would be super helpful for us, just so that I can kind of get a sense of what we should spend a little bit more time on today. So as I mentioned, we're going over integration service. This is UiPath's product or solution for API automations. And so, integration service combines with all of the fantastic features and functionality that made UiPath a space leader when it comes to UI automations. And of course, is kind of integration service situates itself in the build process. So this is, actually talking about activities that you would use within your automations. And again, the idea here is that the combination of both UI automation and API automation really creates kind of a differentiator for UiPath. So being able to combine the types of activities and actions that you would take in vendor platforms at scale, with the UI automation that you might be using on some very tricky, hard to use legacy applications. And we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Any questions about, this kind of one-two punch when it comes to the build tools available within Studio and Studio Web. Please do put those in the comment section. So when we talk about integration service, I think, you know, kind of the meat and potatoes is really around the ability to connect to a wide variety of vendor applications and do so in a flexible manner. So we have built out this catalog that covers the gamut in terms of, you know, all of your different types of business application categories, and we're continuing to add to this catalog. In terms of, you know, within the individual connectors, you obviously have the ability to use curated activities. So these are activities that the internal UiPath team has identified as offering unique value to you, the end user, RPA developers, to accomplish common business use cases, right? Of course, we're never going to be able to cover absolutely everything, and for that we offer also CRUD access, so you know, direct API calls to these vendor applications as part of these activity packs. So there's kind of a I guess dichotomy of experience here where, you know, we have curated activities that are set up for, you know, let's say, you know, your average citizen developer. And then we also have CRUD activities that are available for perhaps someone who's more advanced, understands the vendor APIs, and can execute what they need to using those calls. The other, you know, major, I guess, value add within integration service is the ability to use and manipulate event activities. And event activities are really, or triggers, are the ability to, hey, whenever a Salesforce record is created by this person, start my automation. So we've added, just like the curated activities, we've added a bunch of curated events for most of the connectors in our catalog, so that you can start your automations based on events server side from these vendors. The other major improvement, I guess, or value add, if any of you are familiar with using the HTTPS request activities, really it becomes quite cumbersome in terms of managing and updating credentials in order to log into those vendor applications and having to you know, store those as assets within Orchestrator and invoke those every time you run an activity. What's nice about integration services, you can set up connections within your tenant. You can share them across folders, and Samrat and I will show you how that looks and how that works. But it makes it really easy for you to identify a specific connection that you want to use, let's say for design time. So when you're in Studio and you're debugging and you're in build mode, you can identify a specific connection. And then when you go and publish that automation and set it up in Orchestrator, you can identify a completely separate connection. So in that sense, it really gives you the ability to, you know, identify your sandbox environment for your design time and your production environment for your runtime. And yes, so that's kind of a general overview of the connector catalog. As I said, we're always looking for inputs in terms of what you need to see and what connectors we should be focusing our attention on. I will kind of talk to you a little bit about an alternative for those long tail connectors that we might not be able to get to with Connector Builder, but for now, just we'll leave it at that. And Connector Builder. So this is the what I was just mentioning. Obviously didn't realize it was the next slide, but Connector Builder is basically our answer to any of those connectors that you don't see in the catalog that are critical to your business application stack, you can build out your own connector very easily using this tool. I'm going to run through a full demo of this in a few minutes. But suffice to say, it's, assuming you understand the vendor APIs and can set up these, these API requests yourself, you can then identify activities within your Studio Web or Studio Desktop project and use those API calls and the connections just like you would any connector from the catalog. So this is a really nice feature. It's going GA officially this year. So it'll be in 2310, which is October, just in time for Forward. So really excited about this addition. Okay, so I'm just going to click through all these. I know there's a bunch of, oops, went too far. Bunch of animations there. So just to recap in terms of, what integration service is, what kind of value it offers. As I mentioned before, there's, the ability to govern and share connections, centrally in your tenant is a fantastic feature. I think it'll be much easier, obviously, to use than the HTTPS requests activity. Allows you to build collaboratively with your teams, to share automations easily, to publish them to Orchestrator, identifying again those connections that are meant for your production workflows. Connector builders we just talked about, the catalog we just talked about, activity packs, again, planning on continuing to expand on existing connectors in the catalog and adding new activities. And a lot of that comes directly from inputs from our customers. We just did an MVP summit last week, and I actually had the opportunity to sit down with some power users for, as I mentioned before, lead the box connector and was able to sit down and work out some use cases and make sure that the activities that we have in the activity pack are covering those use cases. So we very much take your input to heart. We talked a little bit about event triggers, being able to kick off automations based on server side events. We're also planning on in short order releasing webhook support. So any kind of event that a vendor offers in terms of what you can subscribe to, you'll be able to set those up as well and use those to trigger your automations in the near future. Finally, some other governance and reliability stuff. We just released a bring your own app feature. And so what you're going to see with most of the connectors, particularly those that offer OAuth 2, we have a public UiPath app that effectively all customers are using should they choose, which has kind of a predefined list of scopes and permissions for each individual vendor application. And so you can use that, or you can set up your own OAuth 2 app for, let's say, Office 365, and make sure that the scopes and permissions are in line with whatever your admin is comfortable with, whatever your SecOps team is happy with, and then you can use that app instead to authenticate, create those connections to our connectors. Slight caveat there, if you start, removing a bunch of permissions and scopes, obviously certain activities might fail. But again, that might be acceptable given the fact that, not always are the people who are building are the ones that need kind of exclusive access to specific resources within those vendor applications. Connection sharing. So again, being able to securely share those connections across your tenant is a huge benefit. And then finally, we just released a notifications and alerting feature. So anytime basically what we're doing in the background is ensuring that the connection stays up to date using refresh tokens. We handle that all programmatically. But in the event that a connection does go stale and fails, we identify that and send that in an email to everybody who's associated to that tenant. So really important, right? Because if you have a connection that fails and it's associated to a production robot, you want to make sure to take care of that immediately. So we'll be adding additional notifications and alerting in future releases. One of the major investments that we've been making in terms of the connector catalog has been in the generative AI space. So I know that there's a lot of hype in this space, and I think particularly as it applies to, you know, RPA and business process automation, there seems to be quite a bit of promise for what Gen AI can help us accomplish within this space. And so we want to make sure to jump on this wave as quickly as possible. And basically our philosophy has been, you know, open and enterprise ready. So we want to make sure that wherever you are in your Gen AI journey, you're able to implement that directly in your Studio and Studio Web processes. And so we have kind of exclusive agreements, partnerships with Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and a couple of the other, you know, startup large language model providers. And the idea is wherever you might be in terms of your, again, investment in Gen AI and whatever vendor you've chosen to work with, will have something available for you in terms of specific, you know, activities that interact with those large language models so that you can generate text and do a whole number of different things and use the outputs from those models directly in your automations. Now, on the other hand, there's also, of course, you know, a variety of products that we're working on. I'd say kind of outside of integration service that are more in the specialized AI arena. And that's where we're using large language models to help you build your automations, right? So one thing is, you know, to have LLMs available directly in your automations to, for instance, help with the business process automation or you know, kind of summarizing or doing a variety of different, you know, use cases. The other thing is maybe you want to interact with a bot and tell the bot what you want to be built, and it will spit out a workflow for you. So that's something that we're working on, kind of a co-pilot type of experience that I think will be super valuable. But again, we kind of have, you know, both bases covered there. So I did list all of the models that are available right now, and we are continuing to roll support for other models out as we speak. So a couple of common use cases. I think this is the question that always gets asked is, hey, Gen AI seems really cool. I like playing around with ChatGPT. How do I apply this, right? Well, there's a variety of ways that you can apply it. I think that summarization and things like translation are things that are super effective. And you know, I think most of the LLM models that I just mentioned have, at least in our internal testing, have demonstrated a high degree of efficacy. So those are things that they're obviously great. Question answering, so building chatbots with these LLMs is a great undertaking. Classification, so kind of giving the model a couple of options by which it should classify a document, for instance, or saying, giving the model a couple of categories for customer review sentiment, and then asking what the model would suggest is what category that belongs to, and then doing things like forecasting, right? So pulling in a bunch of data sources and returning a summary of product usage trends and giving you kind of some key insights to take away are all use cases that we've seen being implemented in various stages. So Samrat, I've probably talked too much already. Do you want to go ahead and talk about what you're going to be demoing?
Yes, sure. So, like Scott mentioned, uh, today we are going to use one of the GenAI connectors and activity that we have, that is Google Vertex. We also have OpenAI, Microsoft Azure OpenAI in our product connector catalog. But today we are going to focus on Google Vertex and see how the activities that we have can help one achieve a simple but very interesting use case of scraping through resumes from a resume or a CV repository in OneDrive or let's say Google Drive, and kind of find out what resume would actually match an open position that I have in Workday. So we are going to combine event triggers, which Scott already talked about. We are going to combine GenAI and how to prompt GenAI in intelligently, providing response back to us that we can use in an automation. So that's what we are going to do in our today's demos. And with that, I'd like to share my screen. Scott, did you have anything else before I went on to the interesting part?
All you.
Okay, thanks. Okay. Awesome. I hope my screen is visible. If not, it will be any moment.
It is.
Great. Okay, so now since I see a lot of result or a lot of polling result is actually saying that not all of you are aware of integration service. So before going into the demo, I would like to give some understanding of what integration service really is and how does it really work in the context of UiPath. So first of all, when you are inside Automation Cloud, by the way, integration service today is only available for Automation Cloud users. That said, we do have a roadmap item to support Automation Suite customers as well in near future. So just a heads up before we went on to showcase what integration service really is. So when you are inside Automation Cloud, this is the icon that kind of indicates what's inside of integration service. The moment you land up, you will be directed to our connector catalog. So as you can see, we have all these connectors. Let me minimize the video pane. Yep. So you should be able to see all these connectors. We have Act 365, Asana, still in preview though. We have SAP Concur, Slack, Salesforce, many of the renowned third-party applications, which you might be using in your day-to-day automation, right? So that's our catalog. Now, we also have connections. Connections are nothing but handshakes that you have done with a particular connector. So basically, if I went on to Jira and tried to add a connection, it is asking me for the site URL. So let me give that .NET. All you need to do is click on connect. It'll redirect you to the authorization URL of the vendor, that is Jira in this case. All you need to do is choose a site and accept. So there you go. You have a you have a connection created. You might ask a question like, does integration service take care of the refreshing of tokens in case if it's OAuth 2? Yes, we do take care of the token refresh so that you can concentrate on building the automation rather than figuring out logic how to refresh the tokens, right? So that's about it for connections. On top of that, like Scott mentioned, we also have triggers in integration service. This experience is kind of disconnected from what we are going to show. So we have two kind of triggers. One is connected and the other one is disconnected. Disconnected triggers you can use in your automations as well to trigger your process from orchestrator. But just to give you an idea of how it looks like if you are on the screen, let's select the same connector, Jira. And what are the events that integration service supports for Jira? We have record created and updated. If you went on to select record created, and then you can select a process to execute, like, you know, these are all the processes that I had published to orchestrator in the past. So you can just, you know, kind of trigger a process right from this page. On top of that, we also have shared connections. Actually, before that, let me go back to another interesting thing that we recently released and Scott also talked about. So Jira, we saw that we were able to create a connection with the OAuth 2 mechanism. But that said, we also have a couple of other options using which you could create a connection to Jira. One is bring your own OAuth 2 app. Basically, when you are not using the bring your own OAuth 2 app, you are accepting the fact that when you create the connection will actually be created for an OAuth app which belongs to UiPath. A lot of times, because of security reasons, your administrator might not approve that app while installing, right? So you can also optionally opt for the bring your own OAuth 2 app, this kind of authentication, where you need to generate your own client ID, client secret, and the rest is really the same. Just when you create the OAuth 2 app, make sure to provide the correct callback URL, or sometimes also referred to as redirect URL. We also released multi-auth feature, which is basically nothing but maybe 6 months earlier, we used to support only one authentication type per connector, but we kind of enabled the multi-auth feature. And using this, not only OAuth 2, but if a connector supported multiple authentication types, you should also be able to find that out with the help of this feature. As you can see, I have selected basic auth, and you have the options of username and API token. Awesome. So that's all for authentication and stuff. Another cool feature that we definitely want to showcase is shared connections, right? So what is actually shared connections? So let's say in a given scenario, you do not have the credentials to create a connection, just like I did create a Jira connection 5 minutes back, right? But in a lot of cases, you might need someone else to create a connection for you. So we back in, I believe, 23.4, if I'm not completely wrong, we came up with shared connections feature. We actually made it general available. So basically, it's based on the foundation of orchestrator folders. What I mean by that is, today, if you go to orchestrator and go to your tenant, of course, you will see the provision for creating folders for yourself, right? So if I went to my personal workspace, sorry, folders, and created a new folder, let's say shared with Scott, created. So we see a folder got created in Orchestrator. Now, what we need to do is just go to this folder, and you can invite users to this folder really. So if you go to settings, assign users, I hope Scott is in this tenant. So bear in mind that in order to invite a user to your folder, that user needs to be present on your particular tenant. Otherwise, I would believe you would not invite. So Scott is there. I am just going to add him. Maybe assign some roles. Scott's role, and I'll just say connections, environments, create, and assign. So at this moment, when you go back to integration service, Scott should have access to all the connections that you would create in this folder, right? So again, going back to this folder, you will see literally no connections in here because the other folder was my personal workspace, and this is just for the connections that I want to share with Scott. And again, when Scott tries to build an automation on top of his personal workspace, he should be able to see all the connections that I have created within share with Scott folder. So basically, that's the kind of context of how shared connections can help one in building automations. Okay, and with that, we now want to go to Studio Web, which is a new offering, and kind of walk you through this use case, right? I will like to keep it interesting by building it live and kind of walking everyone through how we can, just like I said, how we can leverage Gen AI to build our automations. So let's name it Demo Gen AI. Now, we did see the disconnected trigger experience within integration service, right? Now, let's see what a connected trigger looks like. So basically, the first step of while you design the first step of your workflow, it is usually a manual trigger or event trigger or time trigger. When you switch to event trigger, you are actually looking at all the triggers that integration service can support. In this case, since my use case is related to Workday, I am going to use Workday. Okay. It'll take some time to render. Okay, so I already have a connection with Workday, but let's add a new connection so that we can walk you through the end-to-end. I have the credentials here. Host name. Tenant is going to be webpath GPT1. Username is phoefer. And I have my password here as well. Okay, great. So I created a connection and that connection is being used here. P here for #2. Now let's select an event. These are all the event triggers that we support for Workday. In our particular case, we are going to use position opened. Also, you could design your data filters while you are actually designing your event trigger. So data filters are nothing but on top of an event, if you want to filter data based on certain data attributes, you could do that using event data filters. So let's say critical. So if the position is closed, then trigger the automation. If the job or if the position is a critical job, then trigger the workflow. So you have got many options that you can additionally impose before you have gone to the next step of your workflow. In this case, we are not going to use any, by the way. So once we have the event trigger, we are going to grab the Workday get record activity. Again, we can use the same connection. For the object, let's select positions. So basically we get the event trigger for position open, and we kind of invoke the positions object to grab the entire response of the position. So let's switch to object view. It's a lot easier. And for position ID, we are just going to use the variable that we have here as the output. Okay, great. You can well imagine, right, when you compare Studio Desktop experience with Studio Web, this is the advantage that you have. It's a lot more easier to build workflows in Studio Web. Okay, so let's see. We have what we have here. We grab the get record. Now, for this position, what I need to do is go to one of my OneDrive folders and iterate through a couple of resumes that I might have there to figure out if the position that I have opened in Workday suits any of the existing resumes that I might have in OneDrive. So let's go to in location property and OneDrive. This is my folder. So if I double click on it, you should be able to see all the resumes that I have. Let's select this folder. Now, obviously, we would need some mechanism to scrape through the data applying some OCR, right? So first, we are going to use the download file activity, again from Microsoft OneDrive and SharePoint category. And the file to download is actually going to be a variable that we have here. Okay, so let's use variable again. We are going to use current item. And as you can see, the output is going to be a downloaded file. Now comes the interesting part where we can actually extract the data from the candidate's resume. So let's choose extract PDF. This is actually one of the document understanding activities that we built for users to implement within Studio Web. So let's use extract PDF text now. The PDF file is obviously going to be the downloaded file. We've selected it, and you can see apply OCR is turned on, which means it'll be able to read the data from the PDF. Now comes another interesting moment where we use GenAI activities. We recently built Vertex, and as I mentioned before, we are going to use Vertex in this context. You could also use activities from OpenAI or Microsoft Azure OpenAI. Now, this is the most important part when you are using a Gen AI activity, because the prompt is all that you need to design very cautiously. And there might be situations where you need to kind of debug and make sure that the answer is actually related to the prompt that you are saying, you are mentioning. So for this demo, we have the prompts ready. So first of all, I'm going to ask Vertex to summarize the extracted text. Plus insert variable extracted text. Great. And also let's label it likewise. Summarize CV maybe. Next, now let's keep in mind that we are going to create a pre-hire in Workday, and in Workday, in order to do that, you need to have first name, last name, email address, birth country, and optionally the resume of the candidate. So theoretically, we would need to extract all those data properties from the PDF. So this is going to be a little repetitive, but let's see how we can extract other stuffs using Google Vertex. So I'm going to use the same activity again. And going to the prompt, I'll extract the position of the candidate first. Sorry. Use again expression editor. Great. One thing I forgot to show that optionally, you can actually reduce the randomness of the response from AI. So let's make sure that the response from AI is actually at par with what we expect. So we're just reducing, if you look at the description, it just it reduces the randomness as we reduce the attributes like temperature, top P. And similarly, we also need to do it here likewise. One here as well. Okay, let's use this activity again. Actually, we can copy it. So generate text completion again. And what do you want to do here? Let's see, we want to extract the email address. So again, opening expression editor and the email address prompt. Let's rename it to email. Similarly, it should be renamed to position. And what's next? I guess first name. And by the way, there's no need to use all these activities. Uh, once you have extracted the summary, you can essentially do it with substring or stuffs like split, right? So this is just an example so that you can actually see how low code, working with low code feels like. And I promise this is going to be the last step, which is the last name. Okay. This is the prompt. Opening expression editor. Last name. Fantastic. Again, we need to reduce the temperatures. Great. I guess we also need to do it for first name. Again, this is always going to be hit and trial for most of you because you can never guarantee what kind of response AI is going to give you. So always try out with, while you are debugging in debug mode, what kind of response any kind of AI is giving you. Okay, so at this moment, we have extracted first name, last name, email, the current position of the candidate, and also we have summarized the CV. What we want to do next is do an if else. And using the condition builder, what we are going to say is if the position contains the position of the newly created Workday position, then create a pre-hire in Workday. So again, let's use variable and go to event trigger, output. Actually, it's not going to be event trigger, it's going to be get record. So let's use it. Get record, response, position definition data, and we are going to use the job posting title. So if the position extracted by Vertex AI is kind of contains whatever we have the position title in Workday, then we will continue with the flow. Next is using the Workday create pre-hire. So we should have it here. Great. First name, we are going to assign this one, response text. Last name, similarly, we are going to assign last name. Birth country, we did not extract anything using OpenAI, so let's just say US. This is an autocomplete feature we have. Email we did extract, so let's put it likewise. And email type, you can just say home. On top of that, let's also make sure to upload the resume along with creating the pre-hire. Okay, awesome. Once you have created the pre-hire, what I need to do is go to Slack and send me a message. It'll install in a moment. Okay. Not creating a new connection because I already showed it, but let's see. If I can find out my name. No, never mind. We can always go to expression editor and give the person's email. Okay, awesome. And the message I'm going to say is, we found a matching candidate in your resume repo for the position in Workday, and I'm going to assign a variable, trying to cover it really fast. Event trigger, output, not event trigger, sorry. It's going to get record, position definition data, job posting title. And I'm just going to say environment dot new line, because I want to construct the message properly. Plus, how about I just kind of give the summary of the resume. Maybe this. Okay, and let's say environment dot new line plus we are going to output the Workday pre-hire ID, which is create pre-hire applicant ID. Awesome. Even if it's not constructed likewise, I believe most of you would know. Okay, but before we created a pre-hire, what we want to know is if our prompts are being correctly returned. So let's print something. And I'll add a breakpoint here before creating the pre-hire. Okay, now, like I said, we are going to trigger this workflow when I create a new position in Workday, right? So we also have another workflow where we can create the position. I'm creating a AI product manager position, and I'm going to run this. What this means is my other workflow will run now based on this event, right? That a new position has been created. Okay, I see it has executed successfully. Going back to my workflow again, you also have a nice feature here called test trigger. So let's see if we really have a trigger in Workday. No recent item, maybe it's taking some time. Let's check again. Did create it. Let's try running it. Do we really have a filter criteria here? Oh, I guess we have a filter criteria. So that's why it was not able to understand. So let's see now. Interesting. Oh, I guess the availability date is wrong. Sorry. So let me correct that real quick. I know we are running short on time, but I'll try to execute this as soon as possible. I hope we don't have anything. Somehow not able to delete it. How about I refresh it once? Yep. See. Kind of weird that it's not able to find out. Ah, these are the things. Let's try running the other connection. Okay, I guess it was a problem with my old connections. Okay, so okay, we figured the problem out. It was created on my other connection, which is why it's not able to figure out this. Okay, let's run it. It should run. In Studio Web, we have this little pointers that shows you where the execution is right at this moment. So here you go. You see right line that appears here. So it's running really. So if I go to Slack and look at one of the messages it posted me of late, there you go. We found a matching candidate in your resume repo, which is Nehemiah Bishop, email, phone number, and we also have the Workday pre-hire ID. Let me go to Workday and quickly open up the candidate. There you go. We have the candidate here. If we quickly wanted to check if the resume is there, yeah, there you go. We also have the resume. And with that, I like to at least give some time for Q&A. I know this took us a bit of a time, but let's start with Q&A.
Yeah, and feel free to take yourself off mute if you want. I know Scott was answering some of the questions.
I was gonna quickly, well, we have 15 minutes? Right? Or are we at the end?
We're at the end, but I can stay on 15 minutes. If anybody
Okay,
else
well,
wants to.
I'm happy to do a quick run through of Connector Builder, and then I think Samrat could answer questions as they roll in, or we could
Sure.
do voice questions right now, open to whatever anybody would like to do. Crickets.
So let's keep rolling, Scott.
Okay, cool. I am going to quickly show Connector Builder, which is something that we discussed about at the outset of the presentation. So if I go into integration service, and let's say I'm looking for Spotify as a connector, and I can see my custom connector that I created as a test for this. But let's assume that, like, what's something else that we don't have? EBS, right? Oracle EBS. That's one that's often asked for. Something that Samrat, I think, is potentially working on. It's in the works. It's in the pipeline. But since there are no results for EBS, I have this option of adding a new connector. I can also get to connector builder up here in the top right. So I'll go to connector builder. And I have a couple of options when I create a new connector. I can either start from an API definition, so either a publicly accessible URL, or I could do, upload a file that has kind of the Postman collection or Swagger or some other connector file. So I can download a connector from my tenant and then send it to somebody else, and they can import it in their tenant. I'm going to start with the starting from a blank connector. So let's do this. Spotify test CB demo. I'm going to add the icon in the next step. I'm going to go to create. And I am going to go ahead. So now this is the point at which you're probably going to have to get into Spotify's API reference. And so I need to get a couple of things before I can connect. And that's kind of the first key, is setting up the base API, setting up authentication, and any additional info that you want to be available with the connector in the catalog. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the base API. And again, I got this straight from the vendor documentation. I know that their pagination type is offset. This is kind of important for those activities like list, where I'm getting a bunch of records returned. And so the connector knows how to interpret that and make sure to go to the next page to continue to get results. Okay, save that. Now I'm going to go to authentication. And so I have a OAuth app that I've already built in Spotify, and I've made sure that my callback URL is set up appropriately, and all that good stuff, and that I'm authorized to connect to that OAuth app as well. I'm going to add the client ID, which I'm a Boy Scout and I have this already. Cool. Client secret is right here, and you don't need to worry about seeing it because it's going to get. I'm going to add the authorization URL. Again, this will be directly in your vendor documentation. Easy for you to find. Token URL. We're also, FYI, adding this as a potential feature. I don't know about probably 24/4, but the idea would be that this is kind of a guided authentication experience. So for those of you who see this kind of setup and start shaking in your boots, there's obviously an opportunity for us to use Gen AI internally to help you find this information, right? So I have all my authentication information set up here. Should be good to go. I'm going to add a connection. So you'll see that kind of Ezra screen showing up. Hopefully, Samrat, am I showing my screen correctly? It should be good, right?
Yes, you are.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and connect. Hooray! I'm connected now. That's fantastic. Now I can start adding resources. What I'm going to show you is just this skip to next. So this is, I got a song playing. I'm going to go ahead and once I execute this post, it will move to the next song. I have the opportunity to also identify a device ID in the request. So if I have Spotify, set up on multiple devices, and I want to make sure that the command targets a specific device, I can do that, but it's totally optional. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add, so you can use kind of, usually all this is available in a request sample, so you can use the curl stuff to build this in an intelligent way. I'm going to do it by hand. So I am going to add the resource path, me player next, and I got that straight from here, right? Me player next. I already have the base of the API set up. I'm going to call this next song. This is a post. I'm going to create. Now I know I don't need any parameters in here based off the vendor documentation. I'm going to delete that. If I did need those, I could set those up easily. Request fields, response fields. There is kind of like this is a weird nuance, but I'm not going to go too far into it. The activity pack does have to have a primary key for the response. This is kind of, again, in the weeds. Don't need to worry about this for most cases. Also, this is going to get fixed, so you don't have to worry about it in the future. So I should be all good to go to test this request. And it's kind of just like Postman, right? I'll be able to send the request and see it working. So here I've got my Spotify set up. I'm playing some Pearl Jam, rocking out. Little grunge music, was just in Seattle. It's great. Execute. Uh-oh, unauthorized. Let's go back and see what's going on. Permissions missing. So this is good. This is, you're seeing the trials and tribulations of setting this up effectively. So I got to go back to my settings. I'm going to go to authentication, and I didn't add the scopes. How stupid. So I'm going to add a bunch of scopes here. Should be good to go. Let's go ahead and connect again because I've changed the scopes. Now it's going to ask me to make sure that I'm okay with those new scopes. I'm okay with them. Uh-oh. Let's try this again. Good to go. Sweet. So I should be able to do this now. Let's go ahead and turn that music back on. Crank on the Pearl Jam. Send request. Execute. Hooray! I moved to the next song, Blitzen Trapper. These guys are cool. So I've just created a successful resource. Again, these are, direct API calls to the vendor. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Studio. Oops, I have to publish. That is important. Go back to my, Spotify test, not published. Also, I'm going to add an icon here. Why not? There's the Spotify icon. And I am going to publish. Good, we still have people here. I know we're way over time now. So then I'm going to come into Studio. And I'm going to come and I create a new project if I wanted to, or have an existing project, whatever, it does not matter. All of the activities that are available from the curated connector catalog are available here, all the UI automation that I talked about. And now I have these connector builder, anything that I've built out with connector builder is available here too. So again, really no reason for a user to need that HTTPS request activity anymore if you have this available. And again, much easier for me to identify the connector and connect to this and manage all of the many connections I might have across my organization. So I've connected to Spotify test CB, and I'm going to select the object, its next song. Let's turn the music on again. So I'm going to run this in debug. And it should go ahead and execute. Woohoo! Bonobo is on. Little trip hop, chillax music. So that's kind of connector builder in a nutshell. Hopefully that was instructive. Again, it definitely takes a little bit of know-how in terms of understanding how the vendor API works and all of the different options available to you in the setup, but should be super valuable, I think, for all of those, REST APIs that we haven't connected to in the catalog yet. Looks like we got a bunch of questions here. Did we want to speak to, and does anybody have any question, want to come off mute and talk to me and Samrat? We'd love to hear from you.
So can we use these connectors only in Studio Web, or can we use it in like the process is built in Studio desktop application?
Yeah, everything we just showed in Studio Web is also available in Studio Desktop. And so you would just, of course, the difference with Studio Desktop is that you have to go to manage packages and search for the package. In most cases, the packages are going to have I'll just go ahead and share my screen here again. In most cases, the packages are going to have something that says, this is for integration service, right? Here's the connector builder one. So I would install this connector builder activity pack, and in the same way that I just connected to Spotify, that custom connector, I'd be able to connect to it with those activities as well. There are a couple exceptions. So Google Workspace and Microsoft Office 365, those activities are built custom. But they still use connectors. So those aren't going to tell you, hey, this needs integration service, but it'll be very clear when you start working with some of those activities that you need to set up your connections in integration service. And there's always a prompt to do so, right? Directly in the activity. So integration service, it says it's not available right now. This probably because I'm not connected to the right. But usually what you'll see up at the top is either select a connection if you're connected to integration service, or add a new connection, right? Hopefully that answers your question, Avi.
So, I mean, do I need to build a connector again in Studio desktop application, or can I use the existing connection in
No, so
the integration?
what you interact with in Studio Web and Studio Desktop are activities, right? The connectors are what drive, kind of what's available in those activity packs. We're kind of going into the architecture of this, which isn't probably super helpful for you. But again, the connectors are what you connect to. And those connectors then drive what's available in the activity packs. And so when you build something in Connector Builder, and then you use the Connector Builder activities, those connectors will become available in Studio Web or Studio Desktop. Does that make sense?
Yep, got it. Thanks.
Cool.
Hi, this is Chindaria. So is there any licensing cost associated to using this integration services?
If you are an Automation Cloud customer, then this is readily available to you. Maybe Samrat, do you have any additional details on licensing that we can share right now? No, we're still kind of in the midst of rolling that out.
No, right at this moment, like you said, Scott, if any customer is on Automation Cloud, they are free to use integration service.
No, so integrate, like when we say to you freely available this thing, right? So to build the connector and all that is free, but like every time say a process is making a call via integration services to the respective applications. So will that is a chargeable or what it is? Like, is there any cost
No.
associated over there? Nothing is there, right?
No, it's all the robot licenses that you have.
Okay.
But remember, it's good to point out, and particularly in the context of Gen AI, right? Like you're going to have to connect to Vertex or OpenAI or Azure OpenAI, and anything, any kind of fees that you generate via like token usage for those generative AI models are assumed by you, right? You're using a connection that you manage and own, and so those API calls, if they're going to add up, right? And so, you need to be aware of consumption on the vendor side, because we're allowing you to connect to those applications through, both Studio Web, Studio Desktop, robots, and then, any costs incurred thereafter are assumed by you.
Yeah, so that is something like as you said, like Vertex and all, as per the consumption, whatever the vendor has the cost, that is fine. But like in terms of the this example which Samrat run through, right, in making the activity in the workday and all, so those things there is no any cost associated to it, right? If you are on the Automation Cloud, the rest of the things are covered basically.
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
right.
And again, it follows like, you know, if you publish the automation and then assign it to a robot, obviously you're consuming robots in that sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Mhm. Any other
Other
questions?
questions?
Great. Last chance for any questions. Okay, well, I just want to thank everybody for joining today. And Scott and Samrat, thank you so much. This is a great session.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure, Samrat. I'm sure we're stoked to join too, even though it's super late his time.
Plenty more to come. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, everyone.